History is often defined by great shifts: the rise and fall of empires, the discovery of new lands, and the clash of swords. But 1,400 years ago, the world stood at a silent, spiritual crossroads. To understand the story of the man who changed the course of human history, we must first look at the world into which he was born. The 6th century was a time of long shadows. To the west, the Byzantine Empire held the Mediterranean in its grip. To the east, the Sassanid Persians ruled the plateau of Iran. These two superpowers were locked in a century of exhausted warfare. But between them lay a vast sun-scorched void, the Arabian Peninsula. While the empires fought for gold and land, the Arabs lived in a different reality. This was the era known as Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance. It wasn't an ignorance of the mind. The Arabs were masters of complex poetry and intricate trade routes. It was an ignorance of the soul. The pure monotheism of the Prophet Ibrahim had been buried under centuries of superstition. 360 idols now stood within the sacred walls of the Kaaba, the very house built for the worship of the one true God. To live in Arabia in the year 570 was to live by one law: the tribe. There was no central government, no king, and no police. Your safety was determined solely by the strength of your kinsmen. This tribalism created a society of extreme honor and extreme violence. A single insult to a poet could trigger a war that lasted 40 years. Yet, this harshness existed alongside a strange beauty. The Arabs were obsessed with the spoken word. Every year, at the fair of Ukaz, the greatest poets gathered. They would compete in verbal duels, and the winning poems were written in gold and hung upon the Kaaba itself. They celebrated wine, war, and the desert, but they rarely spoke of the poor, the weak, or the divine. Beneath the beautiful poetry lay a dark social reality. Wealth was concentrated in the hands of a few merchant princes in Mecca. If you were an orphan, you had no rights. If you were a woman, you were often treated as property. Most tragically, the fear of poverty and the shame of having daughters led some families to the ultimate cruelty: burying their infant daughters alive in the desert sands. The world was crying out for a moral compass. It was crying out for a mercy. In the center of this chaos stood the city of Mecca. It was a valley of stone, but it was the most important location in Arabia. To understand why, we must look back several generations to a man named Qusay ibn Kilab. Qusay was an ancestor of the Prophet who realized that Mecca's future lay in unity. He gathered the scattered clans of the Quraysh tribe and established them as the guardians of the Kaaba. He built the Dar al-Nadwa, the assembly house, where tribal leaders would meet to discuss trade and war. Qusay's lineage was the line of honor. They were responsible for siqaya, providing water to pilgrims, and rifada, feeding the poor among them. This tradition of service was passed down to the Prophet's grandfather, Abdul-Muttalib. Abdul-Muttalib was a man of legendary presence. He was the one who rediscovered the lost Well of Zamzam. For centuries, the well had been filled in and forgotten. But following a series of vivid dreams, Abdul-Muttalib dug near the idols of Asaf and Na'ilah. When the water finally gushed forth, it was a sign that the blessings of the heavens were returning to the house of Ibrahim. The Quraysh were now the providers of the most blessed water on earth, and Abdul-Muttalib became the undisputed patriarch of the valley. but with great leadership came great trials. Years before the Prophet's birth, Abdul-Muttalib made a solemn vow. If he were granted 10 sons to protect him, he would sacrifice one of them to the divine at the Kaaba. Years passed, and 10 sons grew to manhood. The time came to fulfill the vow. The names were written on arrows and drawn at the Kaaba. The arrow pointed to Abdullah, his youngest, most beloved son. Abdullah was a young man of such radiant character and physical beauty that he was known as the Lamp of Mecca. The people of Mecca were horrified. They could not bear to see such a noble youth sacrificed. They pleaded with Abdul-Muttalib to find an alternative. After seeking guidance, it was decided that 100 camels would be slaughtered in Abdullah's place. Abdullah was spared. He was a man destined for a different sacrifice. Soon after, he married Aminah bint Wahb, the daughter of the chief of the Banu Zuhra clan. Their union was short-lived. Shortly after the marriage, Abdullah set out with a trade caravan to the north. He fell ill on the return journey and passed away in the city of Yathrib, leaving his young wife Aminah alone in Mecca, carrying a child who would never know his father's embrace.
The year was 570 AD. It was an era of miracles and omens. To the south, in the kingdom of Aksumite Yemen, a governor named Abraha grew jealous of Mecca's prestige. He had built a massive cathedral in Sana'a, but the Arabs ignored it, continuing their pilgrimage to the simple cube of the Kaaba. Abraha declared that the Kaaba must fall. He marched north with an army of thousands, led by a massive war elephant named Mahmud. No Arab tribe could stop him. As he reached the outskirts of Mecca, he seized the camels of Abdul-Muttalib. When Abdul-Muttalib went to confront him, Abraha expected him to beg for the city's safety. Instead, Abdul-Muttalib simply asked for his camels back. Abraha sneered, asking why he cared about camels but not the house of worship. Abdul-Muttalib replied with words that still echo through history. I am the Lord of the camels. As for the house, it has a Lord who will defend it. The Meccans retreated to the mountains, watching in terror. As Abraha ordered his elephant to charge the Kaaba, the beast knelt. No matter how much they beat him, the elephant refused to move toward the sanctuary. Suddenly, the horizon filled with a strange sound. Thousands of birds appeared, swarming the sky. Each bird carried 3 small stones. They rained these stones down upon the army. It was not a battle, it was a divine intervention. Abraha's army was decimated, scattered like eaten straw. The Kaaba was saved, and the year of the elephant became the most famous date in Arabian memory. The year of the elephant ended in awe, but the greatest miracle of that year was not the birds in the sky. It was a child in the womb of Aminah. Throughout her pregnancy, Aminah spoke of a strange peace. She felt no weight and no pain. She saw visions of a light coming from her that illuminated the palaces of Basra in far-off Syria. She knew her child was special, but she could not yet imagine that he would be the final prophet, the seal of the messengers, and the light for all of humanity. The stage was set. The lineage was purified. The enemies were turned back. The world was at its darkest hour, but the dawn was only moments away. Join us in our next episode as we witness the birth of the orphan who would become the mercy to the worlds. The story of Muhammad is only just beginning.